What's going on, my friends? For today's episode, I want to send us to the Twilight Zone, where we live in a world where we are not crazy obsessed watch addicts, and in this fantasy land, we would be perfectly happy with a 2-watch collection. Not only are we happy with a 2-watch collection, we are also happy with just plain battery-operated quartz watches. I know it sounds like a nightmare, but for 10 minutes, let us pretend this is our reality. With this fantasy world in mind, I think I have 2 great watches for that 2-watch collection. Before we get into it, let's do a quick wrist check. I'm rocking my Bell & Ross BR05. This is such a beautiful watch and definitely one that you should look into if you're into that funky style. Getting back to the episode, the 2 watches are the Casio A1000 and the Hodinkee Timex Q. Usually I'm not a fan of these Hodinkee limited edition watches. However, this one was such a cool release, I knew I had to have one. One thing I want to make clear is that these watches are not spec monsters. Do not expect G-Shock levels of performance here. Remember, we're in the Twilight Zone, where we just need something simple to get us through the day. And another disclaimer is that neither of these watches have the original bracelet on them. Both bracelets come from other Casio watches that I purchased from Walmart because I just felt that they looked better. As always, I like to start off with price, starting off with the A1000, which I paid around $85 for, and the Timex Q, which was $189 straight from the Hodinkee online store. I know that this one is a limited edition, but as far as I know, they are still readily available at that price. Whether these prices are good or bad is completely up to you, but personally I think they are acceptable. Obviously cheaper is better, but the ability to have a beautiful 2-watch collection for around $300 is reasonable to me. Another thing that is more than reasonable are the dimensions, which I will have on the screen for you. Both of these watches wear beautifully thin and have enough wrist presence for large-wristed people, but are also sensible enough for small-wristed people. I myself have fairly massive wrists, sitting at around 7.75 inches or just under 20 centimeters, and these watches wear just fine for me. The dimensions I find are very neutral, and that is an ideal quality you want in a watch. Not too big or small, and not heavy, but still beautifully dense. You'll find that they don't ever get in the way, and quite often you will forget that they are even there. And as much as I love a heavy and large watch, I can't deny that these watches are simply more comfortable. One of the qualities from both of these watches that I like so much is their fully steel construction, and this is truly what makes the A1000 stick out against its plastic cousins. And as much as I love the A168, the A1000 eats its lunch every day of the week. It's the steel case that gives both watches their pleasing denseness despite their overall lightweight. I mentioned earlier that these watches had neutral dimensions, and I think they also have neutral colorways. They both have that monochromatic theme in the best kind of way. The lack of primary colors, or any colors really, is what makes them so versatile. I think that you could pick any outfit from your closet and either of these watches would pair well because silver tone just goes with everything. One thing I really like is these watches look so stylish without even trying. They are literally just blank palettes, and I absolutely love that. But it's not all rainbows and butterflies. I mentioned that these are not spec monsters, and they really aren't. The acrylic crystal on the Timex is not ideal, and when you're considering that $150 Chinese homages have sapphire, that adds even more salt to the wound. The Casio has a mineral crystal, which is better, and is what you would expect at this price range. Water resistance is also slim to none. The Timex is good for 50 meters and the Casio is good for hand washing in the sink. Neither of these watches are going to survive a mission with the Navy SEALs, and so with all of those keyboard operators out there, that might be a turn-off for you. I personally find that my usual day-to-day lifestyle is fairly dry, so the lack of any kind of serious water resistance is acceptable. The lume application on the Timex is also subpar. It's there, but it's really more to just look pretty for 30 minutes instead of actually provide lume for the whole night. But the Casio is a different story. Just as what you would expect, the backlight is fantastic and really a 10 out of 10. As far as other functions go, it's pretty bare bones on the Casio. You've got calendar info, alarm, stopwatch, and that's it. However, sometimes simple is the way to go, and I think these functions are more than enough for the average watch wearer. I would say the biggest reason for why I picked these two watches all boils down to style. I think both of these watches have so much style and charm, and I think it's enough to overlook some of the negatives that I mentioned. If I had to describe these watches, I would say that they are fashion watches for watch enthusiasts. So fashion watches are usually for people who couldn't give a shit less about the watch community or watch collecting, but I think these watches satisfy the fashionista while still being horologically relevant. And I hate using the word horology. I just think it's so pretentious, but I'm using it now for the sake of trying to explain why I think this way. Casio and Timex are titans in the watch community, so it's great to have a watch collection that is simple, clean, classy, and affordable, and still having street cred among serious watch collectors. But that's about all I have to say on this topic. I hope I was able to show you some watches that interest you in a way that you hadn't seen them before. I'm always more than happy to drag as many of you down with me in this watch addiction rabbit hole. But thanks so much for sticking around this long. As always, a like and subscribe is always appreciated if you can. And other than that, I will catch you in the next episode. Bye.